Hey everyone, welcome back. Joe here again, scalefreak.com, coming to do another parts install for the RC4WD Trail Finder 2. You've noticed I've done a lot of upgrades on this truck lately. I love this truck, so I want to give it the most attention that I can and make a couple changes and look at a few parts, a few things that I'm kind of really excited about. For this video, as you can tell by the title, I will be doing the RC4WD Bilstein 90mm shocks. These ones here I chose because they look as close as they can get to the stock shocks that are on there, but these are oil-filled shocks. So this is Z-D0075, the 90mm. And again, I wanted to get these ones specifically because they are oil-filled shocks. I wanted to move to that on this truck because the stock shocks that come with the truck are not oil-filled, so they just, you know, they have an internal spring that helps them try to go back to full again. To full extension again, but nothing to slow the actual action of the suspension down, which is what I wanted to do. And that's why I picked these things up here. This one here, again, part Z, D0075, the RC4WD Bilstein SZ series. They do have a handful of shocks that are all similar in design, different colors and stuff like that. But these ones here are the Bilsteins, which I actually could get here in North America if I wanted to. I know the Old Man Emu shocks you can get in North America, but they are Australian, so you know, you might find maybe this a little bit more. And I moved to the 90s on the front and the rear because what I'll also be doing is installing the Jalandi 2 shock hoops for the front. Stock, this kit comes with a 70 mil in the front and a 90 in the rear. This is going to make it larger so that I can mount the 90 on the front as well. That way I have the full suspension all the way around, which is one of my goals. Now, to open it up here, it does come in its own plastic here. Open it up, just pop it open. You don't really need to reuse this package again, so have at her. In the back, of course, you do get, well, sort of, 2 shocks fell out, there you go. And you also get a sticker sheet, so if you want to put the stickers around the ring of your shock, plus some for your body, you have that. Right now, I'm not going to go with the stickers. I'm just going to kind of operate them for a little while, see how I like it, and then after that, I'll clean them up real nice and then throw the stickers on it. Now, a couple things that I've noticed from these shocks already that's a big difference from over the stock ones is, number one, the ball ends. So with the stock setup, and you guys would have seen in a previous video, there is a ball held in, but it's crimped in by a couple of brass pieces, and they fall out. In here, I've been told that this is a lot less likely to do that. These ball ends are more likely to stay at the end, so I'm not going to have to worry about stuff like that actually falling out. Not only that, it appears that the outside diameter of this may be bigger than stock as well. Let me check real quick. So this one here, we're looking at 10 millimeters. The stock setup is 8.9, so 1.1 millimeters bigger. Again, these will be oil-filled shocks, so you need to have the extra space. Now, from the package, I can tell you already, these don't have any, well, I mean, there is oil in it, but I think it's just enough to officially say that there is oil in the shock. You can see here there's absolutely no slowdown at all. But it doesn't matter because any shock that I get it, I am going to rebuild it. I want to tear them down, rebuild them, and then go from there. Tear down, super easy. Grab your shock tool, spin off the bottom, done. Spin off the top, done. Internal spring, spin off the bottom, done. And then as you can see, this just has that kind of standard shock cartridge design that you see in just about everything. So let me actually fill these things back up with oil, and let's see where we go from there. Once you get it apart, you're looking at a pretty standard shock system. You've got the body, the bottom cap, the top cap. With these ones here, you do have an internal spring, the rod end on the end, the shock shaft, of course, a little rubber to try to keep you from hitting full max compression, and then the shock cartridge as well. Easy stuff to build, easy stuff to put back together. This is kind of what you're used to in the industry. The build is very similar to even something like an axial shock with the exception of this internal spring. So there's a couple things you got to kind of play with just to get it right. You also can get different sets of these springs if you want to tune the internal capability of that itself. Now what I'm going to do is, of course, I'm going to rebuild this thing using the Protect Blue Grease, the O-ring grease that I put in these shocks. The reason being is because I'm going to put, of course, the Team Associated 30 weight in here just to find a starting point, and it can't bypass, it can't get through this stuff. So this will help the shock for a super long time with not leaking out. That's the goal of that, at least. Now, you guys have watched me build a million shocks, so I'm not going to do that part on camera. I'm just going to skip through this part real quick. Give me a minute. All 4 shocks rebuilt. Now it's time to get them on the rig. Again, the truck itself has 70s in the front, 90s in the rear. It fits the 90s in the rear like that because they're staggered out like that, right? So they can be a little bit longer, whereas the front, straight up and down, you're gonna need a taller shock tower or mounting point, which is what the G2 setup is for, which is what I went with. So first, the rear, super, super, super easy. It's 2 screws per, right? So grab your 2mm, take it off the bottom of the axle. I know the wheel is on, but that's fine. You guys will see this in just a moment. Now, keep in mind your standoff. Where'd it go? Got a little plastic spacer on there that works sort of like a standoff to make sure that your shock is not pressed directly against the axle. So that'll go screw, standoff, and then into the actual axle itself. Now, I really do appreciate the design of the suspension on this truck and how simple it is to actually work on. Having those leaf springs on there, as you can see, keeps it from just kind of folding over. I know when I work on the SCX 10.2, you can often just have the truck collapsing under its own weight, whereas this one here, it will stand up on its own. I just gotta remember what hole I had that in. Now let's see if it's this one here. No, you can see up in the top, up here, I don't know if you can see it from the light, it does have a brass fitting around there. It's all pressed in. Without that fitting, that ball tries to pop out. I can see on the next shock that I'll be able to actually illustrate what I'm talking about. Just give me a second here and I'll get that put in. Of course, because I am putting metal into metal again and I really don't want this to go anywhere, just a touch of the Loctite on the end. Put this in here and pop this up here. So there is one. Well, at least the top of one. And of course, as I said below, make sure you grab that, that little plastic standoff as well. Put that on. And that screws, again, directly into the axle. So, ta-da, that's in. So on the back, see a little bit of a difference. I mean, one's really shiny, but again, it's a millimeter bigger. I'm gonna take this one off really quick just to show you what I was talking about that top part. So if I pull this off here, see, it actually fell apart. So there's one of those fittings, there's the ball. So this has just been kind of jiggling. The only thing holding that thing on is still the screw, whereas the top of this one here doesn't have that, so you don't really have to worry about that. These ones here, again, these are the stock ones, nothing in them at all, just an internal spring. You can't put oil in those ones, they don't call for it. So if you wanna go with the oil shocks, you gotta upgrade, which is exactly what I did. Let me get this, this last back one on, then I'll move to the front. Moving on to the front suspension, I wanted to measure the ride height with the stock stuff on right now. I just wanna check to see if it is going to add anything. We are going to go to a shock that is 20 millimeters larger, but again, we are adding a taller shock tower. So this is part number Z-D0075, which is the shock hoops for the Jalonde 2 chassis, and it is taller than this one, but I'll show you that in a moment. So measuring from the hard bench, we are sitting right now at the top of the, just kind of do this. I'm at just a titch under 4 inches to the top of the bumper support. So let's go ahead and take one of these bad boys off just to get at it. Now, one of the things that you will find on the front suspension is they're definitely blown out. when it comes to those little brass pieces that hold stuff together. The front has worked a lot more on this truck. So let me get this thing off. So first off of the axle. Of course, with this, the front does have a standoff, but it also has a nut too. Oh, one thing to mention about the front suspension too, this isn't a modification that I talked about that I did. And I mean, it's not really a modification, it's just an adjustment. When you get this kit, when you read the manual on how to build it, what it will do is will tell you to mount your shock tower here. So one bolt forward, well, here and here. And then what that will do is allow you to screw that shock to the front of the axle, to the front up here. But the problem is, then you lose a bunch of steering angle, because if the axle, or if the suspension is in the front, it will hit this. So you lose a whole ton of steering angle. So one of the recommendations from the people who've had this truck is to move the shock hoop back on the chassis, so your suspension is still straight up and down, but now it mounts behind the axle, which allows it to give you a lot more steering angle on the front. So I did that, and it did give me a pile of steering angle. Anybody who has driven an actual Trailfinder 2 knows that sometimes steering is a bit of a challenge. So you take every advantage that you can. So look, that bottom one already fell out. Now here's the difference. So there you go. Well, if I set it base to base, there's a fairly large difference with the length, 20 millimeters, right? So that's gonna be huge. If I were to run that on its stock form, at full compression, at full compression, I couldn't mount. I couldn't actually get that to fit onto that shock hoop. So we're gonna just pull this out. This part has not been out of here since I originally built the truck. Haven't needed to. I mean, it's not every day you have to take your shock hoop off. But now I have. So we got that. I'll open the package for the new ones. You can see here, it's quite the difference. I just get them both in my hand. Quite the difference in size. So that is going to allow me to mount, the new shocks on. So easy enough part to change. I mean, it's 2 screws out, 2 screws on. The shock itself is 2 screws out, 2 screws on. But again, if you want to do it correctly, as soon as you get the shock out of the package, rebuild it with some kind of shock grease or oil or something like that to be able to put it all together and not have to worry about your oil leaking out. The oil in a scalar shock, I mean, it's not like a race kit where it's going to extremely alter the performance of the kit, or that you need to make sure that each one is matched perfect. The oil, when you're looking at a scale truck, something like this, really what it comes down to is it's just gonna slow the movement down on your suspension. Like this one here, it's like, it comes out immediately, and depending on what oil I put in this, it may come out a little bit slower. There's a 30 weight in here right now, and who knows, maybe after I run them in for a little bit, I may actually switch it to something like a, which screw is longer? Oh crap, I think this is the longer one. Once I run it in for a little bit, I may actually switch it out to something like an 80 even. I mean, I could go that far. I want to slow the suspension down. That is the purpose. For today's purpose, I'm gonna put this to the hoop on the top, the longest possible setting to see what happens. And then, I mean, let's see how much compression there is on the shock. And after I run it for a little bit, maybe I'll move it down. I don't quite know yet. So there's the one on. Of course, flip the truck over to get it mounted to the bottom. Find the screw, find the standoff. 1, 2, and then into the axle. Suspension on this truck is awesome. Like the design, leaf spring trucks, I never thought I was gonna have as much fun as I am with these leaf spring trucks. They are a blast to run. If you've ever had the opportunity, then you would know what I'm talking about. If you have not had the opportunity, consider building one. These things are really a lot of fun. Maybe one of your friends has one and you can ask to use theirs. Or you know what, with all these modifications, especially with all these modifications on the truck, if you see me out and you say, hey dude, can I wheel your truck for a minute? I'll be like, yeah, of course, dude. Just, you know, be gentle with it. Don't be a hammerhead. But I'm totally cool with people wheeling my trucks. That's a part of the learning experience. Get out there and try new parts, try new things, and who knows, maybe you want to pick it up and put it in your own rig, but you just don't know. The only concern with that is there's so many parts on this truck that I couldn't even tell you what exactly a different part changed as far as performance, because chances are I've added a lot more to it. So there's one of them on. Now on that top hoop, when it's just sitting on the suspension, it's probably about, I don't know if you guys can see that or not. So this is full, and that, if I just let it sit down, so I still have lots of room to go, but just sitting there, it's about halfway down the stroke, which is perfect. If I wanted to, of course, I could put it one more notch down, which would then just lower it a little bit more. But I think that this is where I want it to be, because I mean, it's meant to be a leaf truck. It's not meant to have like massive amounts of articulation. So you still want to wheel it like it would be a leaf truck. So give me a second. I'm going to get this side switched out as well. All right, installed on the front and on the rear. Again, the 90 mil, I definitely needed those shock hoops. You could not correctly install these 90s on the stock shock hoops for the Trailfinder 2. You got to get the Gelande 2 ones, which, okay, cool. Grab them. They're cheap enough, and it's a good upgrade for your kit. Now, yes, you could get some of these shocks shorter. You could get them in a 70 if you wanted to, but I really wanted to go for the same thing all the way around my truck. That way, if I ever do any testing or tuning later, then I know exactly what I'm dealing with. Now, measure it out again. So just kind of let it sit, measure it to the top of here, and we're looking at the same ride height, just a touch under 4, which is exactly what it was before. So I didn't, even with that different internal spring, I mean, I know adding something like this with that internal spring, like these have an internal spring as well, but you know, I thought maybe that longer spring might cause a problem, but of course going that size up in the shock hoop definitely helped. These oil-filled shocks, of course, are going to, again, slow the suspension down a bit. I might go thicker, like even just kind of going like this, I'm thinking, I might actually go thicker on those things in time. But one more thing. Grabbing the body, put the body on. I want to check to see, just on film, I want to check to see if there's any interference from the body. These things are roughly the same height as the top of that motor cage there. So let's just for fun check. Because I know that they do sell body lift kits, which I don't plan on using. So if I just put this on, and let me see, the holes would be about there. I have a ton of room. I've got like this much room before it hits the body, so absolutely no concern there. And that's it. So another fun upgrade for the truck. I'm hoping that this is going to change the performance quite a bit. With the suspension on this thing, you might notice so far, now I've got the larger shock hoops, now I've got the longer shocks. I also have shackles on the front and the rear, and I've recently changed the springs to the black super soft spring. So it's still not the stock-ish springs. I chewed the red ones up, so I changed them to these. I want to see exactly what kind of performance difference that is going to make for me. So that is how I've got that done. So ta-da, another part for you guys to consider. And of course, after I run these for a while, I will give an update as to how I feel their performance is. But again, these are the Z-D0075 for the shocks. And for the hoops, it is the ZSO798. So if you're going to do that, your Trailfinder 2, have at her. If you're running a Gelande 2, you already have these hoops, so don't worry about it. Just look on the RC4WD website at your stock height or length, and then just kind of go from there. I've got these set up now that they shouldn't leak, but I'm going to run it for a while, see how I like it, and I'll report back. So guys, remember, like, comment, share, subscribe. It helps me out a ton. Hell, even go back and watch the video a second time. Everything helps. And if you have any questions, please put them in the comment field below. And you know what? Thank you for watching. Have an amazing night.